Level 1. The Trainee. You sign your name at a recruiting office wedged between a nail salon and a check cashing store outside Phoenix. The recruiter tells you straight up that almost nobody finishes what you're about to start. You tell him you'll be the one who does. You're 19. You swam varsity in high school and ran every morning before school just because you liked how it felt. You think that's preparation enough. You fly to Lackland Air Force Base for basic military training. They shave your head the first morning. They hand you boots 2 sizes off and tell you to make them work. You learn to fold a shirt into a perfect square. 7 weeks later, you graduate, and your mother cries in the bleachers. You feel proud for about a day. Then orders send you straight into Pararescue and Combat Rescue Officer selection. That's where this really begins. Level 2. The Indoc Candidate. Everyone in the pipeline just calls it Indoc, and everyone agrees it's the hardest physical gate in the Air Force. 40 men start your class. Underwater confidence drills come first. Instructors hold you beneath the surface. Pull your mask off, kink your air hose, and watch whether you panic or wait it out. You wait it out. You run timed miles through New Mexico heat that makes the asphalt shimmer. You do push-ups until your arms stop listening to you. Men quit every single day. They set their helmet on a table and ring a bell, and nobody says a word. You don't ring it. 9 weeks in, 6 of the original 40 are still standing, and you're one of them. Level 3. The Pipeline Student. What follows is almost 2 years of schools, each one its own full military qualification. Army Airborne School at Fort Benning teaches you to exit AC 130 in flight. Army Combat Diver School in the Florida Keys teaches you to swim a mile underwater without leaving a single bubble on the surface. Air Force Basic Survival School in the Washington Mountains teaches you to eat insects and drink rainwater for a week straight. Military Free Fall School in the Arizona desert teaches you to fall 5 miles and steer your body like a kite. Then comes Pararescue Recovery Specialist Training, where you earn a National Registry paramedic license, treating real trauma in real time. You start dreaming in drug dosages and airway checklists. Level 4. The Apprentice Pararescueman. The last course is the Pararescue Apprentice course at Kirtland Air Force Base. 20 more weeks that everyone in the pipeline just calls Superman School. You rescue swim through flooded mountain rapids. You hang beneath a helicopter on a hoist cable, while rotor wash tries to spin you sideways. You build a casualty collection point, while instructors fire blanks over your head to test your hands. You learn to fight your way to a downed pilot, and fight your way back with him. You graduate, and at a small ceremony at Kirtland, they set a maroon beret on your head. Your father, a man who fixes transmissions for a living, doesn't say much. He just holds your hand a few seconds longer than a normal handshake. Your unit's motto is stitched into the team flag, that others may live. Level 5. The Journeyman PJ. You're assigned to a Guardian Angel rescue squadron and deployed to Afghanistan, attached to a special operations wing whose call signs you'll never say out loud to your family. Your job is combat search and rescue. When a helicopter goes down or a soldier takes shrapnel in a valley with no road in or out, you're the one who goes and gets him. Your first real call comes at 2 a.m. A Black Hawk down on a 40-degree slope, 40 minutes out. You hoist through total darkness onto loose rock. The pilot's leg is shattered below the knee, but he's breathing. You splint it, run fluids, load him onto the litter, while small arms fire pops somewhere below the ridgeline. He lives. You lie awake afterward, replaying every single decision you made in the dark. Level 6. The Senior PJ. You're 26, on your 3rd deployment, and you've stopped keeping count of hoist missions somewhere past 50. You're senior medic on the team now, which means junior PJs watch your hands before they decide how to use their own. A call comes in for a soldier hit by an IED near a dry riverbed. You arrive to find both his legs gone below the knee and his first tourniquet already failing. You apply 2 more, push blood product mid-flight, and talk to him the whole way back so he doesn't slide into shock. He keeps asking if he'll keep his legs. You tell him the truth, probably not, but he'll live to watch his kids grow up. He survives. You meet him a year later at Walter Reed, walking on prosthetics. He thanks you. You still haven't figured out what to say back. Level 7, the team lead. You're a flight chief now, planning missions instead of being first one down the hoist cable. Your team is sent to support a maritime rescue off a coastline where American boots officially aren't supposed to be. A fishing vessel capsizes in a storm with a downed aircrew aboard. You plan the insertion yourself, static line, night jump, 12-foot swells. You brief your 3 junior PJs and watch their faces for who's actually ready and who's only performing readiness. You jump first. You're the last one pulled out of the water. 2 sailors are alive because of that night, and not one person outside your squadron will ever hear their names or yours. Level 8, the Pararescue Superintendent. You're 38, a Chief Master Sergeant, running an entire squadron's worth of operators, spread across several detachments. You stopped deploying on every mission years ago. Now you sit in an operations center, watching a live feed of a rescue you can't risk yourself on anymore. You authorize the insertion. You listen to 4 unbearable minutes of dead radio silence before your team finally checks back in. That year, you lose a 24-year-old junior PJ named Danny when a hoist cable snaps in turbulence over open water. You write the letter to his mother in your own handwriting. At the funeral, you hand his younger brother the folded flag. He asks what Danny was even doing out there. You tell him the truth, saving someone whose name Danny never lived long enough to learn. Level 9, the Career Field Manager. You're 47, working out of the Pentagon, setting training standards for every pararescueman in the Air Force. You brief generals on equipment failures and pipeline reform. You fight in budget rooms for funding that might keep another hoist cable from snapping the way Danny's did. Twice a year, you visit an Indoc class at Lackland and watch 19-year-olds set their helmets on the table and ring the bell, the same way men did when you were 19. You can already tell which ones will make it. You don't say so. You just take notes for the next training revision and go home. Level 10, the Retired Guardian Angel. You retired 18 months ago. You live outside Albuquerque with a clear view of the Sandia Mountains from your porch. Most mornings you sit there with coffee and watch the sun climb the ridge the same way it climbed over 100 mountain ranges you were never allowed to name out loud. Your knees ache from 2 decades of hard hoist landings. Your hearing never fully came back from the rotor wash. Fewer of your old teammates call every year. Some moved on. Some didn't make it home. Some made it home and still didn't really make it. Every spring, you stand at the back of a Pararescue Apprentice course graduation and watch young men receive the maroon beret while their families cry the way your father almost did. You don't say anything to them. You don't need to. Somewhere right now, in a recruiting office squeezed between a nail salon and a check cashing store, a 19-year-old is signing his name, certain he understands exactly what he's agreeing to. He doesn't. He never could. He'll learn it the only way it's ever been taught. One rescue, one loss, one beret at a time. The cycle continues.